he actually conducted also a survey for that preparation of the white paper. And he asked, I don't know how many people, different stakeholders from the three states. So we had a very powerful white paper. And I remember the extensive research preparation is probably one of the, in fact, this project was funded at the order of 120,000. And I think about 50% of that money went for the discovery phase, at least maybe more. I think about 60,000, 70,000 went for discovery because the discovery lasted 6 months. We got awarded, I think, in February, and we did the collab, I think, in September, 6 months later, because of the extensive research for documents. And we traveled to Northwest, Kevin and I, repeatedly to talk to people and interviewing people and so on and so forth. So we were able to obviously identify the different perspectives, and we documented them, I think, in the report, documented, and also in the white paper. So that is the best I can do as far as the beginning, the preparation phase. Yeah, the most difficult one is a good question. I should say that the broker was a guy named Ben Brofman. Ben Brofman was a colleague of mine during the 70s. Now we're talking about 2000. So 30 years ago, Brofman and I had collaborated on a technology assessment. Those were the days of TA. TA was the beginning of the 70s. So Ben, with whom we were, it's interesting because I hadn't seen, talked to him for many years. And when he put out the RFP and all that, maybe that was the reason we won too. I don't know, but I mean, it was competitive, but we put a good proposal. So the only thing that I remember, Ben did not like the utility companies because the utility companies were dominant in that region, you see. So he alerted us that we should bring them in, but be careful because they might be disruptive. And they were not really disruptive during the collab for the simple reason that the collab, as you know, sort of equalizes everybody. So we told Ben, don't worry about it. We can handle them in the collab because the process does that. Before and after, we don't know. Uh, Kevin talked to them. I didn't talk to them. Kevin talked to them. He probably knows better about their resistance. In the collab, they were fine. They collaborated on the collab, and they were able to understand the bigger picture. The thing that happened there that I remember distinctly, we got them to think beyond the Northwest region because we started with, although we talked about regional trends, we also talk about national. We went to national trends and how the national trends impinge on the regional trends. In fact, if I recall, and I'm not sure about that, the driver requirement, I think it was a requirement, I'm not sure what it was, but it was one that was proposed by Reynaldo, which is interesting. I remember Reynaldo proposing, I think it was number 180. We had a lot of numbers there, big numbers, by the way. I don't remember the numbers, but they were big. I was the facilitator for that. We also had Osbekan there, who had brought some very interesting participants. And that's interesting. You should look at the report, the variety of participants. We brought Hassan, who was very old. And in fact, we had a carriage for him because we wanted them to get into the Futures creative mode. And I think we did succeed to some extent to get them out of the box in terms of the regional thing. And the driver was a trend that was proposed by Reynaldo that had to do with sort of energy efficiency at a global scale. I don't remember the number. I remember the number, but I don't remember the statement. So the major accomplishment there is that we were able, these people, I think they were about 30, 40, I don't remember the number. It was a big group, by the way. I remember a big group for 3 days in a gorgeous facility in the Northwest, somewhere in a beautiful place. And we did manage to get these people to collaborate and also to get them to think out of the box in terms of the regional boundaries. That's what I remember. It was a very difficult task because it was a first type, it was a unique project. As I recall, it was a challenge for the team, for our team, which was a good team. We had Tom, Kevin, Diane, myself, Hassan. I don't remember, maybe another one or two. It was a big team, by the way. 6, 7 people had gone for that project. Or Diana Post, who was there. The triggering question for that, I think there were 3, because we did 3 collabs. I don't remember them, but I do remember it was very challenging, and Kevin, who was very good, still, I remember him as very, very, very powerful. We had to work with Ben Brofman. Brofman also is he's a sociologist by training, but he's got into technology assessment, and he got interested in SDD. In fact, the paper that was published in the World Futures, which I think you might want to look, he is a co-author of that. So he became a partner, and he participated in the framing of the triggering question. It was very helpful because here is a case of the broker. I mean, as you can imagine, I mean, although Kevin drilled down, it's impossible to learn the region. I mean, there were 3 different states. I don't know how many stakeholders. Well, the role of the broker is the most important thing. I mean, there is no, the broker is critical in everything we do. In fact, the only time, 2 times that in my life or with my experience, we have failed. And in both cases, the broker. And it's very interesting that in both cases, the brokers, one was Warfield. Warfield was a broker for a project we did in Detroit. Warfield had left the University of Virginia when I was at the University of Virginia. He left the Center for Interactive Management, and he went to Detroit to work with, at that time, it was a very prominent, not IBM, another one of those big computer companies. They hired him because they gave him a big salary. I didn't like that, but he left anyway. He abandoned me. I've been abandoned many times. He left the Center for Interactive Management. He went to get more money because he wanted more money, I guess. And I mean, I understand it. He had a family. So he went there, and he then calls me and says, I want you to come. And we had a small team of graduate students to come to Detroit and do a project of how this computer company, and it was big, but I don't remember the name now. Somehow, I don't remember it. Because we're talking about now 40 years, so it's hard. He wanted us to go and conduct an SDD project, an interactive management project, we called it at the time, for how this computer company could enter the schools, the educational arena, how they could penetrate that with their computers and stuff like that. So he was the broker for that, and he really did a lousy job, a terrible job. And he acknowledged it on the way back to take me to the airport, which is the first time Warfield, very few times Warfield accepted that he has screwed things up. He took me to the airport and I got off and I said, "We didn't do a good job, John." And he says, "My fault." Because he had not given the client, he had not warmed up the client what to expect, what would come out of it. So it was I would call it a failed project. This is one. And the other one was in the state of Florida when McDonald, who was one of our close collaborators when he was with the U.S. Forest Service. When he was a Fed, he became a collaborator and a facilitator. Very good too. Excellent. With him, we did many, many projects in the Forest Service in different states, in Puerto Rico, in many states with McDonald. I've done many, many, many projects. And then he goes and he becomes I don't know, a chief forester or a forester, not the president, not the first, but one of the leads in the Forest Service of Florida. And he wants us to go and do a project. He, however, did not tell the boss that this was serious, that we were going to do an engagement of stakeholders, and that we didn't want him to just completely disregard the outcomes or the recommendations. So what happened in this particular case, we worked, McDonald was a broker, I was a facilitator with Diane, some others, I don't remember. Kevin was not involved with that. I think Ken Baus was with that. Some others, I don't remember who. So we did this project in Florida. We did engage the stakeholders. We produced a report. Actually, McDonald wrote the report. And later on, he told me that the forester, the chief, the leader of the U.S. forestry, or the forestry of the state of Florida, did not accept any of the recommendations and threw it out. So that was another failure. And in this case, and I told what happened. He says, apparently he did not understand. He was not committed, in other words, to listening to the voice of the stakeholders. And I said, but I mean, Robert, I said, didn't you know that that's serious? He says, I didn't. I failed. So that's two examples of projects that we have done that were practically marginalized because the broker did not do a good job. And that's why, coming close, that's why I told you when we started working together, because I said, if we fail, it's your fault. And you were fantastic because you fired me. Well, interestingly enough, I mean, when I use the two examples here, there are two brokers that knew about SDD, knew what the process is all about. Still, they did not really do a good job. I think the ideal is that the broker has a good communication, his reputation with the stakeholders is good because he is the one or she is the one that is going to influence the stream of action. We do the collab. So if the broker, the broker must bring the right people, help us bring to the table the right people, advise us on that. Very critical. During the collab, he has a critical role to advise us if there are any complications, how to deal with them. For example, if there is any disruptive behavior, which happens sometimes, and the broker, sometimes, for example, in my case, there will be somebody disruptive. I remember some work that we did with the Southwest Fisheries Collab. The broker was initially a guy named David Market, and he was a good man, David. So some other people from other sitting at the table, they started saying, we don't want to do this process and all that, stuff like that. So, the facilitator is very vulnerable in that case because the facilitator doesn't know them, doesn't know how to do with that. So I usually take a break. So I would take a break. Then I went to market. And I said to market, what do we do about this guy? Please talk to him. Tell him what it's all about and why we are doing. So that's what the broker is basically trying to intervene and tell these people that, look, just calm down. The process is going to work out, although it's different from what you know. I mean, to coach them a little bit. So that's another function of the broker. And some of them do it well, some of them don't. So that's the other thing about the broker. The follow-up, the selection of the participants, the support during the collab, and I believe that an understanding or internalizing the process, what it means, what it brings to the people, namely that the voices will be heard, they will be validated, they will be authenticated. Being able to persuade them about that is very important. These are the characteristics. Uh, the the core planning team, it is, in my experience, it be very situational. You see, the best core planning team, well, they've been very good with you. The project that we did with you, Jeff Dietrich. The others in CWA that I remember as being very good was another one that we did with the lymphatic filariasis project, where Flanagan was he was the project manager, and we had a very good broker for that project. A guy, I forgot his name, from the client bit. He was a pharmaceutical executive. He was very good. He also was a friend of mine. So he was very patient. He was very good. And that core planning team project, that process lasted for a long time, 4 or 5 months, working to make sure that we bring the right people. We brought 70 people from all over the world, from Australia, from Ghana, from all over the planet, because it was a WHO, World Health Organization. So that required a lot of preparation, and we had a pretty good core planning team. So we worked for selecting the right people, for interviewing the people. Flanagan did the interviews. Flanagan wrote the preparation paper, which is the white paper, which was pretty good, as I recall. And then we met in Geneva, in a hotel in Geneva. The logistics were very good in Geneva. I was very impressed with that facility. That's also important. As you know, the facility. We had very good facilities in the project we did with you. I remember them, all of them were spectacular. I mean, in terms of the setting, the walls, the comfort of the people, that's also very important. In the Geneva hotel, we went there a week before to Geneva, the team. The team was 5 again or 6. And we stayed in the hotel. We made sure we trained the people in the hotel that there wouldn't be any problems, in terms of the capacity to display information, to manage the coffee breaks. Everything had to be organized very well. And that Diane Canaway and Diana Post were with us. Those two women were very good at that. Yeah, the collab, as I said, it was 3 days. About, I don't remember how many, 30, 40 people there, I think 30, 40 people. Uh, and it was very different from the usual approach. I don't quite remember the details, but I remember that that's why I keep referring to the report as being useful for others to look at, because we had to work from national trends to regional trends, and that was tricky business to bring together national and regional trends. I'm trying to remember whether we engaged the stakeholders for the first one. We asked them to focus on regional only after we gave them in the white paper the national. I don't remember that. But then we moved from what I call the futures creative approach to we look at the barriers, and we actually generate some action, some recommendations for actions, which Brofman told me that some of them, not all of them, but some of them were accepted, including the utility companies. Some of them, the utility companies found very controversial. But the Northwest Alliance, which was an energy efficiency alliance, and this was really it was the best way to broker that project. And that's why, again, the sponsor and the broker are very critical, because we only do the dialogue engagement. That's what we primarily offer to them. We design the design phase, we design it, we conduct it, we report it, and then we can follow up. I mean, we can give them advice about implementation. But if they are not engaged themselves, if we don't manage to make them co-owners, it's hardly anything we can do, because, I mean, what can we do for Northwest Alliance if we are not stakeholders? It's ridiculous. I don't remember the details, unfortunately. Again, I think the best person for the follow-up is Brofman. I mean, if anybody wants to find out, because Brofman was a good friend of mine, we continued to communicate. Although we finished the collab, we wrote the report, we then did the paper that I think is the paper probably mentioned something about the follow-up, because Brofman was involved in the writing of the paper. We said, yeah, I don't even have it. I looked at it. I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it here. Probably not. Brofman was telling me that we were successful in terms of what I call policy changes, behavioral changes, that we created a different way of people communicating, talking about things. And this is really what happens. I mean, our contribution is we change the way they talk. And as a result of that, we change the way they walk. So the behavior is connected to the language. You cannot change behavior unless you change the language. And this is why, for example, making the US Congress legislating that the word Negro is to be eliminated as politically incorrect, contributed to minimizing, presumably, the racist behavior. So what I'm saying here is, if you can change the way people communicate, and that applies to everything we've done also in Cyprus, we help them, number one, appreciate others, and we also help them building up a consensual language, a different language. So we move them from the conventional way of communicating, which is confrontational, and lacking understanding or deep understanding of the different approaches, different perspectives. So we integrate the perspectives, and when we leave them, they recognize that, number one, other people have very good ideas that should be adopted and implemented, and also they talk to them differently. And I think Brofman told me that this happened.